But the problem with that is we don't know what actually is going to get paid for those tax payments that were due in April until people file in July. So that's a big open question about what the close of fiscal 20 looks like and the open of fiscal 21 looks like. The second question is, because of the nature of the way the pandemic came in and just collapsed the economy, not just here, but across the country in April, we don't have a good sort of vision into tax revenue for the next fiscal year yet, and it's going to take a little while to get there.
Hello.
Folks in the legislature
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? Oh, 1 minute. No, I want to listen to the chief of police. Yeah, but I always go early.
I couldn't tell who was speaking.
wait a
Has the program started?
Wait 1 minute, Alan. Sorry, Doc. Are you there? All right.
That's going to have big implications with respect to what next year's fiscal budget looks like for the state and for local communities. But the other thing I would say is between federal CARES Act money that went to Boston and to Plymouth County, $121 million to Boston, $90 million.
Can you see it? Can like I see it after? Oh, okay. Okay.
Regular conversations with our colleagues in local government about how to make sure that they spend that $710 million on things that are going to matter.
You all right?
For kids in school.
They said that about it? Okay. That's nice. That's good. Yeah.
Hi, Barbara.
I'm about the same. Yeah, I'm tired, but not as tired as yesterday. But I called the surgeons. I want to find out the date already. So as soon as I have that date, I'll feel better. You know, just because I want to get it over with.
Naomi, you're on speaker.
Wait 1 minute. Arlene, hold on. I gotta go. Because I talked to people on before. Here I am.
Okay. You're on speaker. That's what you can turn.
Oh. Okay. All right. All right.
Hi, Loretta. Hi, Arlene. How's everyone?
Hello, Lila. How are you?
Oh, fabulous. Just fabulous.
That's good.
Can't complain.
Hello.
Sunny outside and beautiful day. So,
But hot.
Very hot.
yeah, we are inside. So,
That's right.
yeah, we're lucky. Anything happening? Anything new?
I went to the supermarket myself last week. That was so exciting.
Oh, for your first time going to the supermarket?
Yes.
How did you find it? Were you excited?
I was. I really was. It was a novel experience.
Which market did you go to?
I went to Market Basket in Middleton.
Okay.
But you have to get used to the
Did you have a
arrows.
wait?
Pardon me?
Did you have a long wait?
No. I went when it was quiet and there was only one person ahead of me in line when I went to check out. It was great.
Great.
Good. I found out if you go late, there's hardly anyone there.
Alan told me you go at dinner time because everyone's home eating, so they're not in the stores.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
First, I had the food delivered for a month, or I would say 6 weeks. My daughter got something, I have things delivered, and I said, okay. So I would drive around and find the line is outrageous. I said, I'm not going in. So I decided to drive in the afternoon. I find out there are no lines in the afternoon. I would go around 4:35.
Exactly.
Here. So I go pick up my stuff and I'm out. So,
I'm in Florida. I'm in Florida, and if you go late in the afternoon, there's no people, but there's no food on the shelves.
there's nothing. Who's that?
I'm in Florida, Roz.
Oh, okay. So it's always line in Florida, or there isn't?
There's no lines late in the day, but there's also no food. You don't have the choice of what you want.
Oh, really? I went
Yeah.
early in the morning one day, like the senior hours.
Right,
They didn't take anything out.
right.
I was looking for a few things. None of the stuff were out. And I said, okay, that's it. I'll go in late then.
I do Instacart now because I like to, I carry, there's a lot of water. They're heavy things and I don't want Phil to deal with it, and I'm not going to deal with it because I can't. So I said, it's easier. These people are so nice. They ring the bell. They ask me if they want me to bring it into the house. I said, no, just leave it at the drawer. That's fine. And I do a little at a time. I take a few things at a time.
I did that at the beginning, but they didn't get what I wanted. They called me up and said, we cannot find this. Do you want to have this? I cannot find this. So I let it go.
You know, I've been very lucky. Everything I've asked for, they have.
Passover, they couldn't get my matzah. So he sent me pictures of the matzah. There's a tea matzah, there is onion mustard, there is this different matzah. They should just get me this one. They were good. They would text you and send you pictures of what they find.
You're lucky they knew what matzah was.
Yes, they did. Yeah, I know. But they did the best. I wanted to have some zucchini, and they only sell it by per zucchini, per one.
Right.
It's not by pound. So I asked for 2 pounds. They got me 2 zucchinis. I said, okay, that's. So,
You're gonna fry the zucchini and bring it here?
oh no, I don't fry my zucchini. I cut them like French fries, and I dip them in eggs and breadcrumbs.
Well, sounds good. So when are you gonna deliver them?
Oh,
Sounds
anytime.
delicious.
Anytime. It's so easy just to make them this way. Or you can put cheese if you want, but I don't. I just put salt and pepper and breadcrumbs and I bake them.
Gonna bake fried zucchini and bring us some.
Oh,
Herb,
Yes.
they give you a lesson so you can do it for yourself.
What are you gonna bake?
You're gonna fry zucchini.
Fry zucchini, wow.
it's not actually fried. It's just you put it in the, I don't fry it. I just put it in the oven.
That's what I do too.
Yes, and it is
Man,
really
your
good.
hair's so long.
Little Parmesan cheese on it sometimes.
Yeah, my daughter puts Parmesan. I don't. So
Okay,
my-
folks, we're going to ask you all
Okay.
to please mute your microphones at this time. And we are beginning this program. This is our special Lunch and Learn today, joined with Coffee with Kudan group from Temple Tiferet Shalom. Welcome, everybody, and we're glad you're all with us. We're going to ask you to keep your microphones closed throughout the entire program until we give you the go to perhaps ask a question. We're going to ask you, if you do want to ask a question later, perhaps to use the raise your hand feature, which is at the bottom of your participants thing. If not, just start waving your hand and perhaps we'll see it. But we're going to give our guests an opportunity to speak first. I'll ask some questions and then we'll open it up to you folks today in our chat room. I want to take this opportunity to welcome a very dear friend of ours, the Chief of Police of Peabody, Chief Thomas Griffin. I'm not going to go through his bio. You all know him. He's spoken many times in our synagogues, both at our synagogue temple, Ner Tamid and Tiferet Shalom. He's a good friend. He's been open. He's been available to us to talk to us whenever the need arises. Of course, he and the mayor have open doors to our congregations at all times, always open ears. We're going through a very difficult period in our country right now, and that's an understatement. Between the pandemic, which is one of the reasons we're sitting here on Zoom today, and also, of course, the difficulties with the racial issues that we're dealing with, the police issues that we're dealing with. These are very difficult, hard times. Chief Griffin and I, we have been talking now for a few years about how we can bring the community together, how we can do a better job of communicating. And Chief Griffin, as you know, and I have been working together with the Peabody Clergy Ministerial Association in trying to create more dialogue and have people speak to each other with better tone. And now more than ever, it's time for that. And I called the chief a couple of weeks ago after Mr. Floyd was murdered, and all of the troubles really started to brew on the streets of our cities around our country and the world. And I was concerned because I was concerned that we're not hearing about community policing. And having been involved in it myself and other clergy from our community, I thought it was very important for us to hear from our chief and to hear from Tom Griffin, the human being and the chief, and how he feels and what he is doing and what we are doing here in Peabody. So without further ado, it is my honor and my privilege on behalf of our two synagogues here in Peabody, Massachusetts, to number one, say this session is being recorded and it remains the property of Temple Ner Tamid. Anyone wishing to use anything from this program today will be asking for permission from Temple Ner Tamid, Temple Tiferet SHALOM, and of course from the police of Peabody. Chief Tom Griffin, welcome.
Good afternoon.
We're so glad you're with us. There you are, we got you.
You got me now? I appreciate the opportunity. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I'm always very comfortable speaking with you folks, but I just have a couple of quick comments, and then if you have some questions, Rabbi, specific to some of the topics you talked about, I just think it's important to let you folks know that I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I just like to state and reinforce that myself and my offices, in the strongest possible terms, condemn what happened to Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis, and not just what happened to him individually, but also what's been going on as it pertains to all forms of racism and police brutality. We find that there's no place for that in our department or in our city at all. We work hard every day to engage in a positive manner with the community, and we're equally as disturbed as you folks are when we see police misconduct. Unfortunately, there are members of this profession that come into this profession for the wrong reason, and for lack of a better way to say it, they betray their oath. And because of the serious impact that that can have on the community, we think it's important for the police to work very hard every day with the community to root out these kind of officers and build strong bonds with our community. We have a number of different offices whose specific functions are community policing. And we also have a number of programs aside from that help us interact with the community or provide services for the community, specifically to develop positive relationships with the community, so that in times like this or in times of need individually, you'll be very comfortable coming to the police department for any help that you might need. And it is troubling to me that there are officers out there that create a different perception and that cause people to hesitate to engage with their police department. I think that doesn't benefit anybody. If anything, it hurts people immensely. I've spent a lot of time in different churches and temples and stuff talking about this specific topic, and I think it's important and we need to keep talking about it. I think that it's a lack of dialogue between different groups that creates these kind of problems and these misunderstandings, and through more training with the police department, more education with the police department, we're going to be a stronger, more positive community force, and I look forward to that. So and that's kind of what I had as a introduction, Rabbi, but if you have some questions specifically.
Well, I
I'd be
think it's
happy to address
important. Thank you, Chief. I think it's important for us to put people into perspective with regard to the Peabody Police Department and the steps that you've been taking over the years now to obviously create community policing. This is something that they're talking about now, the need for more community policing, and
Correct.
and you know, there are model cities in New Jersey, and I think there's a model city right here. You have been certainly working with community officers, so maybe tell us a little bit about some of the officers that are literally assigned to just working with the community, and then we can also talk about how you've also involved the clergy in the SISM program with regard to what that does and why it's necessary.
Okay, well, I'll start with that. With SISM, what that actually stands for is Critical Incident Stress Management. And what happens is police officers, fire, EMS, we get involved in some very critical incidents. People, bad car accidents, just bad situations that can take an emotional toll on a person. And my belief, and there's a school of thought in law enforcement that to have a good community policing officer, you have to have a very well-rounded officer, both physically and emotionally. And if we don't process going to a scene where there's a fatal accident in a car or a child that may have passed away suddenly or something like that, if we don't process that emotionally and deal with that, it's going to manifest itself in another way. And unfortunately, a lot of times that could be whether it's alcohol abuse or drug abuse by somebody, or just acting out in anger, as we're seeing with some police officers now. So what we've developed is a system where I've identified probably 10 or 12 events that may happen in this city that I mandate our police officers to go and get various forms of counseling, whether they want to get it or not. And we involve other police officers from other parts of the basically eastern part of Massachusetts who have been involved in critical incidents to help them work their way through that emotionally. We also involve the clergy, which includes Rabbi Perlman, and we appreciate him volunteering his time for that. And it helps the guys process what they've observed, what they've had to deal with, because there can be a lot of stress. There's we do a lot of training. We teach, the young recruits basically how to do everything from write a report to walk down a hallway to drive a car. And we send them out to some of these pretty horrific scenes, and we don't give them a lot of skills on how to deal with that afterward, because anybody that's been through any kind of a traumatic event knows that it sticks with you. And we deal with traumatic events fairly regularly, so we have to have a system in place to help us process that. So that's one thing that we've put in place to try and take the edge off of some of the more gruff police officers, because sometimes that's the way it manifests itself. In terms of community policing, this police department for a long time has had a number of different officers who their specific role is community policing. A lot of you may know Jon Nelson. He just recently retired. He worked at the North Shore Mall probably for 20 years. He was assigned up there, and anything that was needed at the mall, whether it was any of the merchants, any of the patrons up there, I mean, he was there to help them and work with them. We did a number of events with them up there. We're just about to name his replacement in the next couple of weeks because he retired, like I said. Anybody that's spent any time at the Teregian Center probably knows Officer Cameron. He's been assigned there quite a long time as well, and he'll work with the elderly population over there. Unfortunately, people target them by various scams and various things like that. And to have a familiar, my feeling is to have a familiar face of the same police officer that you're comfortable dealing with will encourage people to report those types of events that might be happening to them. He recently, within the last couple of years, North Shore Elder Services gave him an award for the work that he does. So he's a valuable asset with us out in the community. Some of you folks may be familiar with Officer Heath. He works downtown. He's based out of the library, and he works with the business community downtown. He works with, he's done some work with the Clerical Association. He spends quite a bit of his time trying to work with NASCAP and the homeless population to try and get people into housing and work with them. He'll work with Father John when it's a very, very cold night to try and get people into shelter so that they don't have an issue in the extreme weather. And he was actually given an award by Father John 2 years ago, I think, when they had the Blue Mass at St. John's. So, I mean, those guys are out there in the community all the time. We also recently just added our 4th school resource officer after the tragedy down in Florida with the high school shooting. The mayor and the superintendent met with a lot of the high school kids, and one of the takeaways from that meeting was that they wanted to see more police officers in the school. They felt more comfortable. Manny Costa has been up there for a long, long time. We assigned another officer, Eric Ritchie, and they work with the kids at the high school. They've actually taught classes. Right now, I'm working with some of the administrators on bringing a public safety curriculum to the school, sort of between police and fire, EMS. We're going to have all kinds of programs for the kids. We'll introduce them to the court system. Anything to do with public safety, that's going to be part of this curriculum. Maria Ferry, who recently retired from Peabody High, is working with us on that. We also have an officer assigned to the middle school, and we have an officer who works primarily with the grammar schools. And they're not up there in the traditional police sense. They're up there to establish relationships with the kids so that the kids can see the police department is made up of, regular people, human beings, just like their mother and father, just like their baseball coach, just like everybody else. And, we help with all kinds of different programs. This particular last few months was very trying for the school department, particularly the grammar school level. They had a difficult time finding some of the kids once they were all sent home, and to try to connect with them so that they could start doing their virtual learning. So the officer that we have assigned to the grammar school, Officer Cochran, I assigned him back to the school, even though the schools were closed, and he took on the role of going to each of these houses and talking with the parents and connecting with them and getting them reconnected with their kids' school, and to help them with that particular phase. So there's a lot of different programs that we've been doing with the schools. I could go on and on and on about different camps and, even just the parades that we did for the schools most recently. A lot of that, the ones, anyone that you saw on the weekend, those officers volunteered their time just to do that, to connect with the community. That's what, the spirit of these guys is here at this department. They want to be connected. They're sons and daughters of Peabody. They want to give back to this community. And that's why they chose to be Peabody police officers. They could have moved anywhere and been police officers anywhere. They could have, tried to get in law enforcement on the state level or the federal level, but they chose to stay where their roots were and give back to where they came from.
I'm certainly aware that people are in the room and they would wish to ask some questions, and I'm going to get to your questions, I promise, but I have a couple more that I'd like to just ask the chief. Again, one of them is to talk a little bit about these things that we've had in place, right? The community academy that we've had, where some of us sitting in this chat room right now have actually attended, and why that was implemented, how long ago it was implemented, and what was the thought behind it. And then I'm going to ask one more final question for you to think about. And that is, as we know what's going on in the world right now, and there's changes underway. There's police training that is being modified. There are changes that are being adapted or adopted. The 8-step program, which was mentioned. Perhaps you want to talk about the academy and then maybe address the changes that may be taking place or may not necessarily have to be taking place in Peabody, and then we'll open up to the questions for the people out in the room today.
Sure. In policing, there's a school of thought called police legitimacy. It basically tells us that we need to let our citizens know who we are and what we're all about so that they understand what we're doing and why. It legitimizes what the police process is, why we're, you know, conducting a certain operation. I mean, if we were to be running radar over on Linfield Street, there's some people that think that the police might be there just to generate revenue, which is not the case. We would be doing an operation like that based on complaints that we got and issues, traffic accidents that we've seen historically. So we're trying to correct that action. So people need to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And one way to really hit that home is with the Citizens Police Academy. In approximately 3 years ago, it's a community policing concept that's been out in the field for quite a while, but we brought it to Peabody, where there's a 10-week program, one night a week for about 2 or 3 hours, depending on how the night runs, where we go over every specific kind of police work and why we do what we do, to give people a better understanding of what the police department is all about. It also introduces probably 15 or 20 of our officers to the community that are attending, and gives everybody a chance to ask a question. You know, you'll be talking to detectives, you'll be talking to traffic officers, you'll be talking to a number of these community policing officers. And if you have a question as to why, you know, why do we do something a certain way, you know, you can get those questions answered. And you can also provide feedback to us about your concerns out in the community. And it's a good exchange back and forth. So it's something we found that's been very positive, and we get a lot of positive feedback from people about it. Because really what you see on TV as it pertains to policing really isn't what happens. It's a lot different than is portrayed out there. So, but just to get a little bit further with some of the information that the rabbi was talking about in terms of changes, there's a big bill going forward. There's actually a number of different bills on the same topic called the Post Bill. It's a police officer standardized training type of a bill. That bill, when it's finally done, is gonna be very beneficial. That particular concept has been something that the chiefs of police have been pushing forward since 2013. We've actually had our folks up at the State House file legislation for the last 6 or 7 years to try and get that accomplished. So that's not something that we're going to shy away from. That's something that we're going to embrace when it comes forward, because it's something that we believe as the chiefs of police that should be in place, that can help us have a much more professional, standardized training process. Unfortunately, in Massachusetts right now, the funding for training is not where we think it should be, but hopefully that's going to come part and parcel with that and help us with that. But as far as that's concerned, we're not opposed to that whatsoever. We already, you know, like I said, we've been advocating for that for several years now. In terms of the 8 Can't Wait campaign, that's been talked about quite a bit. We already do that here in Peabody, to be honest with you, all those different concepts. You know, we don't have strangleholds in our use of force policies whatsoever. We haven't, as long as I can remember. We don't train on it. We don't advocate it. We don't allow people to use it. Some of the other concepts involved in that, our training is one of them is just de-escalation. Our training is based on de-escalation. That's what we try to do. I think another one, I actually have them great. Let me look at them. In terms of giving a warning before shooting, that's consistent with all of our standards. That's what we do when we train. The last thing that a police officer wants to ever do is to ever shoot somebody or take their life. It's just not consistent with why we're here. It's not consistent with what a lot of people's moral beliefs are. I know you see on TV, some of these police officers are shooting people all the time and then going right back to work, and that's just not how it goes. If that were to happen, there would be a very thorough and in-depth investigation, and the officer would probably not be at work for a few months at least, if they could even emotionally bring themselves back to work, and a lot of times they can't. But getting back to some of these other concepts with the 8 can't wait. We do in our policy, our use of force policy specifically has a section related to the duty to intervene. There was case law within Massachusetts back in 2001 that called for police officers to proactively intervene if there's another officer using excessive force. That's right in our Peabody Police use of force policy. In terms of shooting at moving vehicles, the only time that anyone's allowed to shoot at a moving vehicle is if their own life is in jeopardy or the life of somebody else is in jeopardy, and they can do so without causing more harm than they would solve. And I think we do extra reports as it pertains to use of force. We have a whole form that gets filled out. We're an accredited police department. We've been accredited since 2002. So all of our policies, I mean, I think we have probably about 140 policies attested against the best practices in law enforcement. Every year, we have a 3-day evaluation by the Massachusetts Association that oversees accreditation. They come to the police department, they go through all of our policies and making sure we're adhering to all of our policies. And as part of that, under our use of force policy, we have to file a separate report every time one of our officers uses any kind of use of force. It's reviewed by a separate lieutenant who's not in the patrol division. And we keep track of that and we monitor that so that if any officer seems to be having a number of events where they're using force, then we can put a little bit of an extra attention to that and find out what might be going on there, whether it's a training issue or there's something else going on that we might need to address. So I think that's the majority of all the 8 can't wait.
Okay.
And our training is based on a use of force continuum. Obviously, when we go to arrest somebody, we hope that all we have to do is say, turn around, we're going to put the handcuffs on. That doesn't always work out. But our use of force is reactive to how someone reacts to us. If they comply and we can put the handcuffs on, then that's great. Then we just put them in the car and we come to the police station. If they escalate, then we have to kind of move along our continuum at that point.
Accordingly. Okay, so what I'd like to do at this point is I'm going to open up the part of this program to questions. Please keep your microphones muted throughout unless we ask you to open them, because if you open your microphone, you become the star on the screen, and we are broadcasting right now on Facebook and on YouTube, and they're seeing you and not the speaker. And our guest today is Tom Griffin, the Chief of Police of Peabody, Massachusetts, who's having an open, honest dialogue with us. There are a couple of people that have some questions. I'm actually going to go with Lisa. Lisa, you can open your mic, and then I've got iPad 45. I think that's Richard second. If anybody else wants to ask a question, just raise your hand down at the bottom of the chat box, down at the participants box, and I promise I will get to as many of you as possible. Lisa, you can open your microphone, and if you have some questions, go for it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi. And thank you to the Chief of Police for being so open. I just have a couple of quick questions. And the first is, I'm a Peabody resident, and driving through the city, oftentimes you see police, with different job sites. And I find it, I find it
I
very,
lost you there for a second.
am I back? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, someone had their mic open.
Somebody opened their mic. That's okay. I understand. So just the other day I drove by, it was a National Grid. I honestly don't remember what the job site was. There were a number of workers there, and there were 3 police officers very close. Why don't our police officers wear masks? I know they're uncomfortable. I know it's hot. I know it's terrible, but I feel like they should be leading by example. And when they're at a job site and we're in this pandemic, why aren't they masked?
They're supposed to have either a mask or another face covering that they're supposed to be wearing. And we're working on as hard as we can to get that accomplished. Believe me, if they maintain the 6 feet, then that's not required. But unfortunately, sometimes they tend to merge together. We do have a supervisor that goes around that tries to pull them apart and do that. But we do have a lot of work right now in the city, and it's tough to stay on top of. But it is something we are addressing.
I do understand if it's one person and he or she is directing traffic and there's no need for it, and I understand it's hot. I mean, this happened to have been a group of 3 people next to each other chit-chatting, and I found it incredibly disheartening that they should be
No,
leading.
I agree with you. And we're working on trying to reinforce that as best we can. And
Especially for our kids. Our kids are going to be looking up to the police officers.
Absolutely.
So that's number 1, and I thank you for addressing that. Number 2 is I was at the June 5th Black Lives Matter demonstration down at the courthouse, and I have to say I thought it was wonderful that I felt it was very peaceful, very respectful. One thing that I just would like, and I may have missed this when you, there was the, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, no, I just saw somebody else pop up on the screen, so I didn't know.
Yeah,
towards-
Lisa, let me just stop you. Everybody, please keep your microphone buttons off until we ask you to unmute. When you open your microphone, you become the star. The star that's talking goes away. So please do not touch your microphone buttons unless we tell you to. Lisa, go back.
Okay, so towards the end, when everyone was kneeling, which I felt was an incredibly powerful moment, people were chanting for the police to take a knee. And I understand that definitely got very rowdy at some points. And you came to the microphone and you gave your reasoning for why the police weren't taking a knee. And I may have heard it wrong, so I'm just going to tell you what I heard and then you can correct me. And that was, you felt that taking a knee was representative of the actions of what you feel, and I think the rest of us feel, was a very bad officer with the knee on the on poor George Floyd. People tried to explain that this was a symbol being co-opted by the Black community in a sign of respect for and solidarity for the Black community. And I think it would have been nice if maybe just, I understand you needed to be aware.
I've lost you.
Whoops, we lost you, Lisa. Lisa, you actually, oh man. Lisa, we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me?
Now we've got
Hey,
you.
now, yes.
Finish up. Go
Where
ahead.
did I leave off? I apologize. I know I was rambling. So I think it would have been nice for one person to potentially have taken a knee, because I understand the dangers of all of you doing it, not being able to be aware of the crowd. But do you still feel that taking a knee is bad symbolism, or is a symbolism that you understand being in solidarity with the Black community?
I understand that that's how they feel. And under those circumstances, at that point in time, it was a difficult decision. I think there's been a lot of conversation between now and then. And I think, you know, that's how we learn and we evolve, and, you know, a different scenario may present a different, we gave the officers the option to do as they felt. And again, on Saturday up at the park, the same thing.
I wasn't able to be there. Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah,
does that answer
I mean,
your
it's just,
question,
you know,
Lisa?
I felt that way. We did have some very serious concerns. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
We did have some. Rabbi, can you hear me?
Now we're breaking up. I'll tell you what, Lisa, I'm actually going to ask you to close your mic.
Okay. Well, just one more quick point on that. So there, after all of that, I was with a bunch of young people and I was trying to explain both sides of the story.
Hello?
Hi. One of them started one of the young people started a Facebook page, Equality in Peabody, and perhaps it would be interesting to invite 1 or 2 of those people into your citizens policing academy as further dialogue. And
Good
I'll just
point. Good point, Lisa. Thank you. I can also tell you, I'm not sure if the chief can hear us right now or not, but I can tell you that the Peabody Clergy Ministerial Association just recently met, and we talked about inviting dialogue with that young group. And we are working on trying to get together with a socially distanced, face-to-face talking group amongst the clergy. And so, Chief, I'm not sure if you're back with us or not. Chief, can you hear us?
About that, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we've got you. Okay. So did you want to finish your answer?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, we did have some concerned about safety in that event. There was statements being made broadly, but there were also statements being made specifically to the Peabody, the city of Peabody. So we had to be diligent in that respect. And
It's very difficult with young people that are very strong-minded, but yet don't have the life experiences. So as I was there with my daughter and a lot of her friends that have started, I was trying to explain the balance of why stores had to board up, but yet could still support Black Lives Matter. One of the girls that I was talking to, she is the one who started the Facebook page, because I said, you want to get involved, get involved. So I think bringing them into the Citizens Police Academy and into some of the clergy discussions would be a nice bridge for them to.
You're talking about the girl that organized it?
No. The girl who organized who started the Facebook page Equality in Peabody, Annalise.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So I've had some conversations with her about, this is an adult, this is how adults look at it. I understand this is how you're looking at it, and we need to find a happy balance and a happy medium for working together. So it might be interesting to bring her and a few of those people into that dialogue.
That'd be great. I mean, I went down and spoke. I think the girl was Heidi that actually arranged that. And I gave her my card and I told her to call me.
Yeah, that's great.
We can have these discussions. And I actually, there were two other people that I did the same with. And, I'm not I'm someone, I want to be out there and be open and talk with people about what the only way we're going to learn what people are concerned with is through conversations and
education.
Lisa, that's a really good point that you're making, and I'm going to have to move along because I want to get to some of the
Absolutely, I'm muting.
But I think it's a really good point that you're making, Lisa, and I would recommend that you speak to the young people as well and ask them to keep their eyes open for the next community policing academy. Chief, is there an age limit of how?
No, we actually have, we tried to get some high school kids involved before, but it didn't really work.
They might get involved at this time.
Yeah, well, I think there was an issue because a lot of them are involved in after school activities as it is. And we tried to do a separate one between like 3 and 5 in the afternoon, just because of some of the content.
Well, that's true. Some of the content is adult, but that's okay. People in high school have to hear the facts of life too. iPad 45.
We'd have to check with their parents, I think, first. But
well, of course, we'd have to sign a waiver. Is this Richard?
It is indeed. Good afternoon. Chief Griffin, this is Richard Strauss. Debbie and I took the community course last year, just about graduating a year ago. One of the things that we learned in the course was the importance of canine, the dog cane and canines in policing activity. In fact, Deb and I stood in front of Chandler's the day that, 150 police cars went by out of respect for the passing of Kane. I'm wondering, what is the police department doing as far as the replacement? We haven't heard anything. I know how important it is that to have a canine as part of your corps, both for trying to find people who get lost and in case of drug involvement and stuff like that. So just.
I thought we already put that out there. We actually have another dog, and he's working with the same handler, and he just needs to go get his certification in explosives. That's what we have him trained in, primarily because we have so many large events in the city and in the schools. We felt it was better to have someone with a dog with that background versus the narcotics background. But he, we did replace the dog, and it almost has all of its certifications, and we'll have to get that out publicly a little bit better than we have.
Yeah, I hadn't heard anything. No.
Okay. All righty.
All right.
That's why he's here today. He's here today to communicate. I think I saw Steve Shemuel with his hand up. I'm not sure if you actually wanted to ask a question or not.
Yes,
Steve?
I did, Rabbi.
Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. The question I'd like to ask is not related to Peabody or Danvers, just in general. When someone is running and is not armed, like it happened in some occasions, the police shoots many times. My question is, why they don't, well, my question is why they don't have to shoot to kill. They can try to shoot so that they can stop the person, and they don't have to shoot so many times. The only time they can do that is only if the person is armed and they're afraid about their lives.
Correct. Yeah, there's a couple of different things with that. An officer's only supposed to use deadly force when their life or somebody else's life is in danger. Some of the circumstances you're talking about that you've seen more recently, obviously, are very questionable in terms of whether people are following the policy properly. And that's going to be addressed either in court or people are going to have problems within their department. What sometimes happens is when people are under stress, they'll tend to not realize how many times they've fired a weapon and shoot more than they probably should. We're trained to shoot 2 bullets and then kind of reassess. Sometimes adrenaline gets going, tunnel vision. It's just a physical reaction to being under that level of stress. And sometimes people don't even realize how much they've actually shot their weapon. And that's why sometimes you'll see that somebody shot 10 times and they may not even realize it. And that's happened before. But in terms of, some of the events you're describing, the policy is your life or somebody else's life has to be in danger for you to use deadly force. Now, there'd be a scenario where someone's running away and the officer's concerned that they're going to carjack somebody on the next street or hurt somebody on the next street. And that's why they felt they needed to do that. And that's a possibility. But all that needs to get fleshed out in an investigation and to see what was going on through that officer's mind at the time. But that's what the policy is in terms of that.
Thank you for coming and thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, Steve. I will tell you that having been through the academy and also working firsthand with the police, through different training for counseling and whatnot, what we perceive as something that might be going on is different in the minds of an officer who's been trained and actually right there in the middle of something that's going on in their face. And it's so hard to analyze how people are thinking, especially when you're under fire or what you think you're under fire. So I have one more question, and I want to ask Rabbi Kudan, who I noticed is with us today as well, and I want to ask Rabbi Kudan perhaps to say a few words as well. So I'm putting you on notice, Rabbi. But before I do that, I want to ask you this question, Chief. We're seeing a lot of cell phone videos. I mean, it's everywhere. Everybody's carrying a cell phone. I've got one standing next to me right now. We all do. Does cell phone video always tell this story, or is it causing more of a confusion for people?
I would have to answer both ways. I mean, it's it depends on, if you get the whole version of an event, then it might tell the whole story. But if somebody parses out pieces that they don't want you to see, I think it can be problematic. I think we operate under the assumption that everything we're doing right now is going to be videotaped anyways. And I think that's the right way to operate. I mean, we just try and, I just think that as long as, it's, the full and complete version of what happened, then I think you can make a proper evaluation of something. But again, it doesn't give you the whole surrounding of everything that's going on and how the officer feels and things like that as well.
What led up to the phone being taken out and starting? So this is always it's not cut and dry. It's not always cut and dry. I want to turn things over to Rabbi Kudan, give him an opportunity to say hi, and also I have Alan and Debbie Pransky would like to ask a question. So Rabbi Kudan.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank Rabbi Perlman for inviting us to Temple Tiferet Shalom to be part of this conversation, and Chief Griffin for all that you do to keep us safe in town, and for being willing to have this conversation with us. You and your office is really done a great job. The other problems that we had before this pandemic and the latest issues are still with us, and so we are we've appreciated your support and your protection. And so I'll let the others ask their questions. I think it's been already a very informative conversation.
And we want to thank you very much for joining us as well today. So I'm going to ask Alan and Debbie Pransky to ask their question, and then Roz is going to be in right after them. So thank you, Rabbi, and Alan and Debbie.
Thank you, Chief Griffin. I have a question about training. Do you feel that the especially local police forces and possibly even state police forces receive the proper amount of gun training and retraining to make sure that they're up to speed and handling things so that they can react properly? And like you're talking about the adrenaline coming in. And I've always been concerned about that training in the factor that I'm not so sure. Do they get the proper training that they should?
We train 3 times a year with our firearms. I mean, I think, you could always, the more you do, the better you develop your skills and things like that. We also do some scenario-based. We don't just stand at the gun range and shoot at the paper. We do some scenario-based training. We've actually gone to the mall on a Sunday night and done like an active shooter type of training. And there's different, services you can, whether it's through simulation, that type of a stuff where they have videos that you can do shoot, don't shoot type scenarios that you can, it comes, there's a lot of different stuff for us to train on, so that we do the most that we can with what we have. It's difficult to replicate the situation that an officer would be in to, use deadly force. You literally have to feel your life is threatened, and you can't really practice that too much, so it's hard to, we just do the best we can. And we try and get people comfortable with their weapon and using their weapon and skilled, so that if they do have to use it, they're going to use it properly and effectively and not have any kind of unintended damage either.
Thank you for the question. Roz, I'm sorry, I did not see you in the chat room earlier. I think you had a couple of questions. Roz? You may open your microphone, Roz, please. You're still with us. Let's see, Roz, you still there? Yeah, you're there. Let's get you unmuted, Roz. Oh, let's try to get you unmuted. Roz, we're not unmuting you. Unmute yourself. Unless you don't want to ask the question anymore. Okay, if you do want to ask the question, try to hit unmute. I've got you here twice somehow. Anyway, all right. So are there any other questions out there that anybody has? Of course, what you just said is so true. It's so hard to train reality, in real time. You can do all the war games you want to do, but until you're actually sitting there getting fired upon, it's how do you train on that? It's very hard. Are there any other questions anybody has?
A couple people have their hands up.
All right. See, you're good. You're watching. Rich Band, go for it. Open your mic. Oh, you know what? He doesn't have his microphone on. Richie, you don't have a microphone connected. You just have a hand up. Type it into the chat box. We'll ask the question for you.
I'm there. Can you hear me now?
There's Roz. Okay, Roz, go for it.
Oh my God, 4 different ways. I have 2 things to actually mention. One is about the psychological training. Who actually gets into the police academy? That's one. Do more experienced officers find it difficult to change what used to be is not anymore? And the big one that I have had, not just recently, but for a good few years, a lot of the servicemen come from the veterans, and I used to be an MP, and that's great. But when the MPs were out there, I'm sure there was the enemy on the other side of the fence. So my question is, do they automatically see that somebody who's facing them that don't look like them are automatically the enemy?
Okay. I wasn't in the service myself, so I would hope that they would be able to I don't think they look at their community members as the enemy. I don't think that that's not, certainly not something we would condone or train them on. In terms of when someone gets recruited to the police department, the city hires a I can imagine it's a psychiatrist to do a number of interviews, and they have to pass a psychological exam to come onto the police department. And, in terms of your other question about change, I mean, it's like anybody else. You need to work hard, and if sometimes you have to use different methods to bring about change, whether that's, training, or it may get to the point where it's somewhere where you have to apply some type of discipline to get the point across that this is not acceptable behavior, and this is how we're going to do things going forward. And sometimes there is resistance, and either people are going to comply or they're going to have some difficulties. I think I covered all three of you.
Thank you.
I think you did. You did a good job. Roz, I'm glad you were able to get your microphone open.
Me too. Thank you.
I see Rich.
Rabbi, I opened my mic. I'm on two different things.
Oh, you're Rich.
It's me.
Okay.
I'm
You're
Richie.
Rich.
Sorry. It's a pleasure to listen to today, Chief Griffin. My question is, do Peabody police wear body cams or their dash cams? Is that part of the community policing that's officers use?
We don't at this point in time, no. We've talked about it internally, and we're looking at different programs and things like that. There's a lot of expense that goes on with it. It's just something, we haven't gotten to the point of it yet. But I would imagine in the future going forward with the technology and everything else, and the ability to have that, I think it's going to at some point be standard in all police departments.
So I want to ask you a question. I think perhaps one of the elephants in the room hasn't been asked, and I'm surprised about that, because people have been calling for defunding the police. And we know that doesn't mean taking away all of your money, but it means perhaps putting money in a different area. And I know that, you just said you can't afford to put in the cameras, right? There's an expense involved in that. I also happen to know that you're also trying to put in, or at least have vehicles that are roadworthy. You have a building that is in a flood zone and probably needs to be replaced. So when someone says defund the police, now I sound like an advocate. So I am, because I've been there. So you have to understand, folks, I've been through the academy. What do you say to someone who says defund the police, especially to a community department like yours?
I obviously am going to strongly advocate for as much funding as we can, as the city deems appropriate. But I also understand, some concerns about mental health programs that people feel are important, and I feel are important. And if there's a better way for us as a community to deal with someone who's in the throes of a mental health crisis, that the community decides that that's the right way to go. I think they, by taking money away from the police department right now, before that advocacy group or that particular group of people is put together and out there working, is kind of putting the cart before the horse. We go to those calls because right now there isn't someone else that goes to those calls. But if there's a better way, we're always trying to do things safely, and we certainly don't want to be involved in someone getting harmed. If there's another way that we, as a community, as a city, can accomplish the same goal as getting that person who's in a crisis to a safe place.
Okay, so obviously we need to put money where it's necessary, but we also can't take money away from where it's necessary. So we're in a
right. Yeah, you gotta, it's a balance that you have to make. But I obviously, like I said, we could, I'll advocate all the time for more funding for the police department. There's a lot of programs we can do, but I also, I do hear the concern about the mental health piece of it.
There certainly is a lot of news going on right now. There's demonstrations happening around, as I said, the world, and you guys are, really taking it. How is that affecting the morale of the police department? Not just yours, but policing in general.
Well, I know with our guys, it's it's impacting them, but I think they also realize that it's an issue that's bigger than them. It's a national issue. I've gone over some of the policies and procedures that we already have here in place, so it's not necessarily about them personally, but it is discouraging for them. I think some other places are having a lot more of a difficult time, and I think in Atlanta, police, some of them stopped coming to work. You know what I mean? We're not anything like that at all. I mean, it's a little bit of a challenge for the guys but they came to this job for the right reason. They do this job for the right reasons, and they're going to continue to, and they'll march forward, and we'll be okay.
Are you concerned about the potential for people not wanting to become an officer in the future, or do you think as we balance this and figure this out and come up with new protocol that it'll go back to a point where there's that give and take and respect?
I think that's kind of two different things, but in terms of recruitment for the police department, we're fortunate here in Peabody. We seem to have a steady group of applicants that are interested in becoming Peabody police officers. At the last civil service exam, we had over 100 people that were residents of the city that wanted to become police officers. So in that respect, I think we're doing okay here locally. And I forgot what your second part was there, Rabbi. I'm sorry about that.
Well, basically, again, it's the morale. I mean, when things get better, when things come back to normal, we think that the morale will get better and change, and we'll just go back to the way things were for people to want to get involved in the police department and to become.
I think that the more people become aware of their own local police department and what they're all about, and the steps we're taking to try and do the right thing by the community, and as we have in the past, I think people will realize that we do have a good police department here in the city, and attitudes will be a little bit different. You see this periodically with different times that different things happen, it usually tends to balance out in the long run.
I always say being a cop is a calling, it's not a job. Myrna, do you want to ask a question? I have Myrna, and then Rabbi Kudan was going to ask one more question about the school liaison officers. Myrna, you can open.
Thank you. You hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for recognizing me. It's been fascinating, especially listening to the chief. Besides that, I'm from Danvers, so I have to stick up for my community.
You have a good department over there as well.
I think so. Thank you. Patty Ambrose does a great job.
He is.
Well, but my question is, how much interaction is there really between, like your ideas, our ideas? How much interaction is between a city and towns like we are?
I think Danvers is very similar in ideas with our city. I know Pat very well, and a lot of the officers over there. They've actually gone a step further than a lot of police departments. There's only about 95 police departments in the state of Massachusetts that have state accreditation. Peabody's one, Danvers is another. There's even fewer that have a national accreditation, which Danvers actually holds, which is quite an accomplishment. I think under Chief Follett, they may have gotten a national accreditation, and they're a very, very good department. So that's kind of what shapes, the way the department moves forward. And I know they have some wonderful officers over there. When I was a working police officer, I worked in Salem and did investigations, and we were constantly working together with the Danvers Police Department, and they're a very, very professional group, and they're hard work, and they have a lot of the same concepts and ideas. I know they have folks in the schools and they have folks that do all kinds of different events. So I think Danvers is a good town.
Okay, with just a few minutes left, I want to get to Rabbi Kudan's question. I also want to get to Ron's question, and then I think we're going to wrap things up for today because we're going to, obviously your time is valuable, Chief. And so Rabbi Kudan, ask your question, then Ron, and that will wrap it up for today.
Thank you, Rabbi Perlman. Chief Griffin, do we have school liaison officers, and do you find that they're effective in their role?
Oh yeah, we actually have 4, which is a lot more than most cities and towns. And I do think they do a very nice job. Their primary role is to create a good environment between the school kids and the police department. And that's they're up there every day. They also attend after school events. We've run every year for the last, I want to say almost 25 years now. We would run a 2-week camp for kids for free to be able to come and interact with police officers from all over the North Shore. It's actually headed up by the district attorney's office, and we do a number of different classes with the kids, but they also get to do some fun events like go to the aquarium, and the fire department has a role where they'll bring a big fire truck and spray them with the hose and all that stuff. And it's a good way for kids to interact with law enforcement from Lynn to Gloucester to Beverly to Saugus. And it's kids that the teachers are aware that they probably wouldn't be able to afford. One of these week-long camps during the summer can cost $500, you know what I mean? So these kids would be a whole summer without ever interacting with anybody. So we do that. We actually run it now up at we can't run it this year because of the circumstances, but we generally run it right up here at the Higgins. And there's a number of other programs. We've done some leadership training programs with some of the middle school kids and things like that. So I think it's not like, I think some people think that a police officer in the school is like an occupying force, and that's really the exact opposite of why we're there. We're there to forge those relationships and just kind of be a friend and a mentor. Actually, at one point in time, Manny Costa was the senior advisor for one of the classes for their senior year because he had developed that kind of a rapport with that group. So I really do think it creates a good relationship, and it helps us in the long run, fostering goodwill.
Thank you, thank you, Chief, and thank you, Rabbi. Ron, you have the final question because we're going to run out of time. Ron?
In that case, I'll talk quickly. Thank you very much. Chief, my question is, with the Jewish high holidays approaching in the fall, a 2-part question. Number one, what does the police force do differently around those holidays? And second, and if this has been covered in previous meetings, I apologize in advance. The level of communication between you and the temple communities relative to what we should be doing at that same time?
Good question.
We do have some information that we put out through the rabbi about, I forget what the name of the program is, but Mark Sayer came and talked about situational awareness at the different temples and things like that. Right. Whenever there is a holiday coming up, whether it's, with the Jewish community or any other religious community, we always remind the officers to make extra checks of the property, to keep an eye on what's going on. If we know that there's going to be particular events at a given place, we'll spend a little extra time there at that point in time as well. Just so that there's a presence and hopefully it kind of puts people at ease. And if something were to happen, I mean, you folks probably remember the situation out in Pittsburgh about a year ago. We reach out right away and let the officers know to make sure they're checking the areas. And I think I communicated with you, Rabbi, very shortly after that happened, or Rabbi Schusterman from the Chabad and some of the other rabbis, just to let you know we're aware of it and we're trying to stay ahead of it. And there's always two-way communication. If I've talked to a number of people through the Clergy Association, so if any of those folks have any kind of concerns pertaining their particular faith, they can reach out to us and we'll take some extra steps for them as well.
I can tell you firsthand, Ron, that whenever there's been any issue or question of security, the chief and I know Rabbi Kudan and other clergy have always been able to reach each other. We actually have each other's cell phone numbers. And I remember just before the pandemic when we talked about closing, and who knew? We figured we were closing for 2 weeks, right? We're just going to shut our churches and synagogues down for 2 weeks. I remember texting you. And I remember saying to you, by the way, we've decided we're not going to have services for a while, whatnot. You wrote back something like, Roger that, which told us that the leadership of our community is listening. And with that, it's probably a good place for us to end. You're not only listening, but you're also available. And I think that anyone who has any concerns or anyone who feels as though they'd like to speak to you or any of the officers, obviously in our Peabody Police Department, you guys are there, and you give out your card. You say, please call us. And I don't think you just mean it. I'd say it to not mean it, but you say it because you do mean it, and you do want to have dialogue with the community. You've always been there for us, and I know the police officers watch our synagogues, watch our churches, watch the Chabad. I know you folks are there because we see you there. And Chief, on behalf of the community, on behalf of Temple Ner Tamid and Temple Tiferet Shalom, I can tell you we appreciate what you and your officers do day in and day out to help keep us safe. So with that, we thank you for your time. We thank you for your candor and your honesty today. You've been a wonderful guest, and may God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Many thanks.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Rabbi Pillman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.